Good afternoon, jazz guitar fans and fellow forum members. Welcome to this episode of Shopping for Tools. I need to build a little sanding station so I can contour pick guards, tailpieces, truss rod covers and bridges. So I need a little bobbin sander and I need a little disc sander. So here I am at Axminster Tools in High Wycombe. I was actually going to buy a pillar drill from someone else in the area, which I ended up not buying, but I decided to pop in here on my way back to show everyone a little bit of the English machine shopping experience or woodworking shopping experience. Here we have a pen makers section where you can look at which pen you would like to make, and then below there is the components to do that. And here we have the whetstone sharpening section. I'm going to get one of those Tormex because I think they're the quickest and easiest way to keep your tools sharp. Not cheap though, so perhaps I'll try and get a second-hand one. And here we have some Japanese marking knives. I've never used these before. I'm a little bit mixed about how good they are. There's generally a consensus that, or a myth, that all Japanese woodworking tools are amazing. But if you look at some of the pros in Japan, they actually use a lot of Western tools as well, including some Western chisels. So I'm not sure whether those marking knives, just because they're from Japan, are very good. But I've not yet used one. Here we've got some set squares and I can't remember what these are called, but they're very useful for woodworking, marking out, especially if you're doing furniture, things like that. These are interesting because these are pin style. So I think they're much more accurate at recreating a curve or a profile than the plastic ones that you can buy off Amazon, which are a little bit clunky. Here's an even wider one. If they did one even longer than this, I would buy that because that actually allows you to get the contour of an arched top very quickly and very accurately. So something worth bearing in mind if you want to quickly take the contour of a jazz guitar. Top and back plate. I don't think there's much interesting here. I'm having a look at some Proxxon little tool cases. I actually need a set of spanners. I've got a tool set very much like that made by Weha, which I think is brilliant. One of the best things I bought from Amazon. These are interesting because they're spanners, but they're also torque spanners. So they have a directional... Once you've put it on the nut, you can keep it on the nut, which is really good because I hate having to try and wind a nut on and constantly having to take the thing off and try and put it back on again. You all know what that's like. Here we've got some Veritas planes. I like these little ones. I guess they're for shipbuilders and model makers. They're cute, admittedly, and I think they work. You know, they're genuine. It's not a Christmas cracker toy. But, you know, the Axminster stuff, I don't know, mixed reviews on that from people. I think it's just the quality of the iron or whatever that they get from China. Maybe it's just not as good. Maybe it's not cured as well. Maybe it's not machined to the right tolerances. I don't know. I think Wood River and Axminster have their own brand. I don't think it's called Axminster, but they're all made by probably the same company in China. And they're affordable, but the reviews are mixed. But I think you could probably get them to work pretty damn good. These are some Japanese, I think these are Nori Aomi, if I get the right word, Japanese chisels, which I'm really interested in because they're laminated. But the problem with the Axminster ones is I cannot see the lamination. They never show you the lamination. Even here in the packet, you'll never see the blue or white paper steel lamination onto the back of the iron, I think it is iron, handle or main body of the blade. So I'm not convinced that they're the real authentic best chisels you can get from Japan, so I'll leave them alone. I've got a couple of Japanese saws. Ever since I started using them, I've not gone back to Western push saws because pulling is just, it keeps the blade straight. They can make the blade much thinner. They can make the teeth much sharper. That the cut can be much finer. I feel that you can be more accurate with them. I just think they're great. I don't see why I would ever go back to using a Western saw. So I suppose out of, so far, the 3 items from Japan, saws, chisels, and marking blades, I think we're 2 for 3. I think the chisels and the saws are definitely an improvement. I don't know about the marking blades. This is one of the air filters that I am considering purchasing for my CNC machine, but I'm just not sure about the power of it. It's got a 100mm outlet. The drum is pretty small. By that I mean the filter drum that you see on it, the paper drum. It's pretty small. The bag's pretty small, but it can sit above the CNC machine on the wall, so it's out the way. I just don't know if it has enough power. I think it's rated, it's got a 0.75 kilowatt motor. It's rated for about just under 1,000 cubic meters a minute, and I just don't think it's got enough oomph, so I'm just having a look at it. It is smaller and lighter than I thought, which in a way is a good thing, as long as you can put a bigger bag under it, which you can. So, but I don't know if the CNC machine's on for 4 hours, 5 hours at a time, will that filter clog up during that process, which is something you don't want. This is a panel saw in the real sense that it's a wall mounted kind of saw, very useful for workshop space, but again, the reviews on that pretty mixed. These are they're like the Fiji, I think that's the brand, sprayers. It's a HVLP sprayer, high volume, low pressure, an HLV, one of the two. It's a more traditional, conventional spray system. So the compressor is in the blue. Oh, it is the Fuji one, yeah. So the compressor is in the housing that you see there. Axminster do sell some kind of random bits of wood. Nothing there that interested me that much, although I wouldn't say any of it was bad. Probably a little bit overpriced, but what do you expect? It's smaller cuts in a shop that doesn't really sell wood, so if it's found its way there, they're going to charge you more than you would if you went to a wood yard. But you have the the convenience of being able to buy it there and go home and play around. We've got some varnishes, finishes, stuff like that for the wood. And then here we're going to move into the router tables. So one of the things that I check with the router table, apart from whether the table's flat, which I can't with this because I don't have a straight edge, is things like the mitre gauge. Does it flop around in the mitre channel? And with Axminster stuff, you're generally going to find the answer to that is yes. Now, I don't know if there's some adjustments there. If you look at the end of the black rod that sits in the channel, there is a Allen screw, like a grub screw. Perhaps that changes. Yeah, it does. I don't think it does because there's only actually one moving disc. Sometimes you have two, and you can split them out so that they grab each side of the internal of the rail, if I'm making sense, and that actually makes them really solid. I think Incra has that system. So with that Axminster, I don't think I'm that impressed, but I'm not totally, what's this? I've actually got that table, so I need to sing its praises. Someone lent it to me, so many thanks to them for doing that. It is much appreciated, and it's going to do a fantastic job. There's another Axminster mitre gauge, and I think that's a UJK or a UKJ. I'm not sure. Dyslexia is a wonderful thing. But that is a brand that I think tries to place itself a little bit above the typical Axminster stuff. It's usually in orange, so you can easily tell it apart as a bit of a separate thing. This stuff is really interesting. I saw these come out a few years ago, and what it is, it's a kind of like a CNC hand router, and what it does is it follows these stickers that look like dominoes, and you upload your shape from a kind of CAD design onto the router, and it will, as long as you can try and keep it as close to the line as possible in the software, the router bit will follow that line instead of your hand. So I don't know if you can see, I've gone back to it because I want to take it out more. Where that arrow grabs onto that green line, when the green line goes green, what it's doing is that the router head, the cutter, is moving internally within inside the housing to hit that point. So you don't have to cut perfectly out the shape of I think that was a spaceship. It will do it for you, but you just have to be close enough to the line and have the stickers in the view of the camera in the bit of hardware. It seems like a bit of a gimmick, but I think has its uses. We've got some wooden tables here, pretty solid. Carpentry benches, something that I have yet to find myself wanting to buy, probably because I'm not a carpenter. But I'm sure one day I'll make one day. This is of interest to me because some guitar bridges have internal parts that you need to sand, and how would you get something sanding in there, because everything's usually over 100mm wide. That is a very thin strip of sandpaper, and you can push the bridge through it, so that might be a useful tool going forwards. These are some diamond, I think they're called fret files or sharp or diamond whatever files. Some people use these for nut cutting and bridge cutting, but I don't see how, or perhaps they just don't have the right profiles. They do have this packet here of the grey ones, which I think are very well regarded, something like Swiss ones. I think they're the best in the industry. And I've got one out which I think you could kind of use, but because the file itself, the radius, it increases as you get to the center of the file. You could argue that the first bit you could use for like a high E string, and the center of the file you could use for a low E string. But because the sphericalness is it's quite a bit, you would only be able to use such a small amount of the file that I just don't think it would work. I don't know if that makes sense what I was saying, but yeah, I just don't think it would work. So here we are at the kind of main event for me, which is the mini sanding stations. And the first up is a belt sander. I think it might qualify as a linisher, which is usually for metal. And the first thing I'm going to do with this Axminster stuff, or any machinery basically, is just to check how stable the table is, and or the fence, and how good the extraction looks, and then the price, of course. A motor's a motor. If it's rated for, constant use, if it's duty rated, then that's good. If it's not, then, So Axminster has two ranges. It has what it calls its workshop range, which used to be its hobby range. And then it has the professional range. So you can see there that I'm playing with that table. I'm kind of pushing it backwards and forwards, and I've given my finger a little wag. That was to remind me of what I thought about it. And I'm not impressed with that one. The table is flopping all over the place. So I would not buy that bobbin sander. This one I seem to be a little bit more impressed with. But then again, this is the professional model, where the previous one was the workshop model. So you would expect this one to be better value. Now, I will say that even though this one is better value, it's nearly £600, which I think is too much. And secondly, I still don't think it is as stable as some of the competition. For example, the one made by SIP. I'm not saying it's better, but I'm saying that the table on that is sturdier. Is sturdier. So I'd probably buy that one and save myself some money, because I think the SIP one's 250 quid, whereas the Axminster one's only 600. I've wagged my finger there, I think. I don't think I like the mitre gauge on that, but I knew that I wasn't going to like the mitre gauge on this. What I liked about this disc sander, though, is the cast iron chassis is really good. It's very strong. It's a heavy bit of kit. I actually ended up buying, a few days later, another one from a different shop, but I was not unimpressed. There's a double kind of negative, I think. I thought it was reasonably impressive, and for the price I think it's about 250 quid, so that's not bad at all. Here I'm just trying to check to make sure that the disc, how true it runs, not the actual sanding disc, but the aluminium, whatever you want to call it. If it's wobbling when it spins, that's obviously no good. And I think here I'm just having a little play with the mitre. But yeah, on the face of it, on the disc face of it, that is something that I would be happy to pay a couple of £100 for and see how useful it is. And if it works out, then that's great. Thumbs up. And this one is this is strange because this one I think is the professional model. This is the workshop model, so this should be the cheaper, less sturdier unit. And this one has a very thin aluminium extruded fence. Did I like it? No, I didn't. I felt that the cheaper model, the workshop model, was better value and just as good, but probably had a more satisfactory table. This one is a no-go. This one, I thought it was okay. Yeah, it's a good, but I think the price is a bit high on that. Again, about 600 if I'm not mistaken. This is again the workshop range, so the slightly cheaper range than the professional range. The tables on these though are pretty good. They're cast iron. I don't think I would want a disc sander that small. It feels a little bit gimmicky to me. I think that's something you'd want more if you were just trying to, I don't know, just doing smaller work. Now I know a guitar bridge isn't big work, or a nut is small work, but just, I don't know, I just feel like if you're going for a disc sander, you want something 250 plus. I've given that one the thumbs up as well, so I would be happy to buy that. On the face of it, on initial tire kicking, I would be happy to buy that. But in terms of disc sanders, you want something I think that's going to be 250, 300 mil in diameter, because discs, the center cuts, I think, more than the outside, or the outside travels faster than the center. And if it's a small disc, you're kind of traversing kind of 3 different time zones. That doesn't make sense, but whatever. I think I'm not too convinced by the table on that one. It does flex, but if you're putting something very close to the belt, I think it's pretty firm, so it got the thumbs up. This is a drum sander that does not have good reviews on their website, but I don't know if that's fair or not, but I think it seems to be fair by the review itself. You can usually judge if a review is fair by what the person says. These are belt sanders, oscillating belt sanders. Again, I think Axminster's price is getting a little bit high. I think there are probably slightly better machines out there for the money. This is their dual drum wide belt sander, which I would have bought instead of the one that I did buy, but it's a tricky one. I decided to go with the SCM because SCM have a good build quality. They've been making that drum sander for eons, and it has digital thicknessing, whereas the Axminster one doesn't. And Axminster's tools, regardless, are a little bit on the cheaper side, and that's not a bad thing. It's just, but the quality's just not there. And if you're going to spend money, maybe spend £1,000 or two more to get that thing that gives you that better result. The better your result, in my opinion, the better the quality. The better the quality, the more you can stand above the rest. So I'm obviously playing around with this guard. The reason why I'm actually playing around with that guard at all is because it has a 63mm outlet, and the Felder guard on my panel saw only has a 50mm outlet. And Felder, I think, deliberately make that saw guard extraction bad, so you buy their £1,000 overhead saw guard system, which I think is a total rip-off. So naughty Felder, and no, I'm not going to do that. If I do buy an overhead guard, I will not buy yours out of pure principle. So again, I'm checking things on here like the quality of the source, the stop on this rail, and it's not good, which is a shame because they, this model that we're looking at is touted as being their kind of beefy, accurate. They've got the little micro adjuster in there. I would buy this overhead guard. I thought this overhead guard was pretty good. I think Axminster want about £500 for it, so I'd rather buy that than give Felder £1,000 for making the one on my machine crappy to try and push me to do so. I think what it is that if you have a 500mm outlet on something, a low volume, high pressure, or a big dust extractor, it won't suck through the 500mm. You won't get anything out of it. You need something a little bit bigger, something like 63mm plus. This panel saw is one of Axminster's sliding panel saws, and I thought it was going to be rubbish. To be honest, I thought it was going to be rubbish, but I was actually really impressed with it. The sliding carriage on that, and I really hate to say this, it feels nicer than the one on my Felder, but I have a problem with my Felder one, and I'm going to take it up with Felder. But it is so smooth. I don't know who makes this for Axminster. Initially, I thought it might be someone like SCM, like Minimax. But I don't think it is. I think it's a Czech company, or a Polish company called Rojek. But that table is smooth. It's as smooth as the one on the Altendorf. And that, now here's the thing with Axminster. Can it be set up accurately? Well, my Felder one, they had trouble with that, let's be honest. It's smooth. How long will it last? I've got a 5 or 6 year warranty or a 9-year warranty on my one from Felder. What do Axminster give you? Probably not much. I'm just checking again the fence there, how sturdy it is, because those things are really important. To me, they define whether something is really good, is good quality, although that can be a mistake. All of the stops and the guides and the fences on my Felder machine are really, really good. They do not move. But then there are other things with the Felder machine that let it down, such as the sliding table. Again, you can see Axminster have put a beefy hose on their overhead guard extractor. That's easily 63mm, where mine on my Felder is 50mm. Not good. Naughty Felder. This is really just a crosscut sled for, I think, a rip saw. Sorry, not a rip saw, a crosscut saw. But it's beefier. Sorry, it's beefier. And it does the job. This is that company, Rojek. They're an Eastern European company. And they have come on the scene. I mean, they've probably been around for a long time, but they seem to have come on the scene in the last 5 years. And they make all of the standard kind of industrial equipment. I didn't like that one. I felt something was not good with that. This is a really cheap and nasty piece. Actually, I'm not sure this might be their crosscut saw. I don't know, but if you look with Axminster, they've always got a lot of different ways for you to have the sliding carriage. This is a crosscut saw. Yeah, this is the crosscut saw. So yeah, the cheaper ones like this one, and some of the ones that you think that should be really good, like the Compass black one that we saw earlier, they're disappointing. And actually, some of them are just plain awful. But then sometimes Axminster, they do surprise you. This machine, I thought that was good. Here's that Rojek brand again. This is a spindle molder. Again, would I buy one over a second-hand Felder or Martin? No, I would not. So, yeah. This is the Axminster one. I actually went to buy one of these once off a guy, and I just turned it down because it looks okay, but there's always something that are not right with them. And maybe Axminster, they work through those teething problems with their supplier in Taiwan, which is where I think all this stuff is made. But I think the frustrating thing with Axminster is you just think to yourself, why could you have not spent the equivalent of £250 more with your supplier and charged me an extra £500, and we could have had that problem fixed, or you could have had that additional item on there that would have made this machine so much better. And it's frustrating because, of course, Axminster will turn around and say, we make these to a price point, and they know their market better than I do. So I suppose I can't really complain, but I would say that yes, sometimes please just spend that extra £100-200 with your supplier for that extra quality bit of metal or something, and just charge me a little bit more. I'd rather take the money, because the gap between that and what I have to pay Felder, or what I have to pay Martin, or what I have to pay Powerhands is way more. But there seems to just be that middle gap in the market, and Axminster pretends to fill it, but they don't. They're still, they're still prosumer. It's still prosumer stuff, I think if you could put it in American terms, you would have freight, Harbor Freight. Is that it? And Axminster are probably on the same level. The other thing that I'm looking for is a dust extractor for the CNC machine, a standalone one, which I mentioned earlier when I was looking at that wall-mounted one back in the back a bit. And these ones I'm not interested in. They're about £2,500, but I thought I'd again kick the tires and just see what they were made of and whether I thought they were of good quality. And actually, I think these are quite good. I quite like the design, although this one has a design, again, an Axminster design flaw. The hose is too long, so when you take the bin out, the hose snags between the bit where the bin needs to go back in. I mean, that would just annoy me every time. I'd have to do something about that. They should have kind of thought that one through, but whatever. People have complained that positioning the bin is difficult when you're trying to get the lid back on. This one is easier because it has a snugger fit. But yeah, I think this looks pretty good. I think you would say this is on par with the Laguna stuff. I knocked over quite a few of those, I must say. One-handed tool shopping is not easy. That stuff there is the engineering series stuff, which I think Axminster is for metal workers, and I think that stuff's a little bit more expensive, maybe a little bit more accurate. And then we're coming over now to the hand tool section, so this is where your chippies would be hanging out. Some biscuit joiners. I've actually got one of those dominoes. I got both of them, but I've just sold one to a friend because I hadn't been using it, and of course the moment I gave it to him, now I want it to make some cabinets with, but there you go. I've got a Lamello domino machine anyway, so that'll do. These are my favourite. This is my favourite tool company. This is Mafell. I don't know why they're again, probably because I'm just an outrageous snob and a terrible all-round person. But yeah, I've always wanted that dual dowler. And that drill, it fits in my hand like a glove. I love my fine drills, but that one fits even nicer. And if I had £300, I'd buy it. Anyway, I think that about wraps up the tool shopping. And thank you very much for watching.